Join us for the next Kundalini After Dark session on Zoom. Visit brentspirit.com/afterdark to register. See you then. So the witch wound, the witch wound. So Kimberly Jones coined this term, the witch wound, and she used it to describe the legacy of the dark times when women were burned at the stake for being witches. Of course, people having spiritual experiences being ridiculed. There's this period in history where particularly women were quite literally lit on fire and burned to death because of their experiences, because of their gifts, because of the way that they were experiencing the world. Sounds pretty extreme, almost like it's exaggerated, but it really did happen, right? This is historical stuff. It did happen. And if we compare our time now to those times, we're in very different times, but yet still this wound, the witch wound, seems to persist for many of us. I know I have it. Many of us do. And it seems to be a cultural wound that's sort of ingrained deep within the culture, right? That we fear those with, some spiritual capacities, if you will. And of course, the witch burnings themselves were definitely not the only instances of, those with spiritual gifts, Kundalini awakenings, being persecuted, being killed, right? Of course, we think of probably the most famous incidents of this sort of thing happening. We think of Jesus Christ, right? Very evolved, very awake, very aware person, right? And many spiritual gifts, the ability to perform miracles, the ability to captivate an audience and to share some teachings at the leading edge that maybe were a little bit contradictory to what was going on in the culture at the time. And of course, what happened to Jesus? Well, they crucified him, right? They crucified him. Not the only one as well. And as we know, Jesus wasn't the first person to be crucified. It was a punishment that they had for many different things, but I'm sure that he wasn't the only one to ever be crucified for, having some spiritual things to talk about that were a little bit different than what was going on in the culture at the time. Of course, afterwards, there have been many martyrs, right? People also killed, tortured for their spirituality. Now, in today, fortunately, like I was saying, there's a very low likelihood that any of us will be, crucified or burned at the stake. However, there are still some very, very painful things that some can go through, that some people do go through, that I'm willing to bet many of us have gone through throughout our journeys, which is, of course, being shunned, being judged, being ridiculed, being labeled, being bullied, maybe being sent off, locked up somewhere where we don't want to be against our will because people have labeled us or interpreted our experiences through their own lens, right? Being called crazy, right? This is maybe not the same as being burned at the stake, but the impact is very, very difficult to deal with, very difficult. And, it can lead to some serious, serious challenges that people have, with addiction, challenges in relationships, self-worth issues. It's trauma, right? It's trauma, it's pain, it's a wound that we carry. So this is, of course, like I said, it's a collective wound. It's ingrained in our culture. Some of us also bring it into this lifetime from prior lifetimes where maybe we were witches, for example, that were burned at the stake. Maybe we were experienced some sort of, significant abuse because we were having these experiences that people didn't want to accept. They became scared. Maybe they became jealous, right? And so many people may have similar experiences in this lifetime, dating back to their childhood and whatnot. But for me, I had an experience in the past couple months or so where in meditation, so I had a past life memory come forth, demonstrating to me that, of course, this was, something that I've been dealing with for at least this one lifetime in the past, likely more. And so I'm sitting in meditation, it's total quietude, completely silent mind, deep state of samadhi, you could say. And in this spaciousness, a memory bubbled up, emerged. And it wasn't a memory from this particular lifetime. And in this memory, I was somewhere in Europe It seemed to be something like the Middle Ages. And these two guards had grabbed me, and I was a man. They had grabbed me, and they were taking me, dragging me somewhere. And I was begging them, please, please don't put me in that hole again. Don't put me in that hole again, please. And so that was the extent of this memory. I came out of meditation feeling that, of course, I was being thrown in some sort of jail cell or a dungeon or maybe a literal hole in the ground, a cave, I don't know, for speaking and sharing about some spiritual things, right? Maybe I was a crazy madman walking around in the square. Maybe I was some sort of wizard or mystic. Who knows? But what's interesting is that just in this very brief memory, there was so much for me to unpack. And one thing that really came to me was this word again. I was saying, don't put me in that hole again. So this meant that I was actually put in the hole once before, probably for the same thing, sharing about my spirituality. And so I thought, well, look, they put me in the hole, the dungeon, whatever it was. I came out, I didn't learn my lesson. I continued to go on and to share and to teach and to practice whatever it was that I was doing that was spiritual, that wasn't, in alignment with the culture. And being punished didn't really stop me. I was doing it again, right? And so they put me in there again. Now, that, I guess, shows the commitment that I have to this path. It also shows the power of these experiences, that I don't think, somebody being punished, tortured, even burned at the stake can really dim the light that they have to shine, can really thwart the mission, right? You'll just come back. Even if you die, get burned at the stake, crucified, etc., you'll just come back and continue the work. That's what I'm doing here today. Now, that lifetime was not my previous lifetime, but there was at least one in between. And in this next lifetime, I was fortunate enough to spend in a spiritual community in isolation for the most part, probably to just do a lot of work and not have to deal with, the people, judging me and ridiculing me and throwing me in the dungeon or whatever. But anyway, in this lifetime, I'm here. And I think I'm fortunate enough, along with all of us, to be able to, explore our spirituality in much more safer context than any other time, any other place in the world, at least here in the West. And so we should be fortunate enough to do that and not let this lingering witch wound hold us back. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some ways that we can address this witch wound that we all have to some degree or another from prior lifetimes, from the culture, like I said. So this dream that I had, when I was, saying, don't put me in that hole again, telling these guards, don't put me in the hole again. I told this dream to my good friends, Kate West and Gordon Curtis of When Lightning Strikes. And when I mentioned this to them, Kate said, I have actually a very, very similar memory from a prior lifetime. And I thought that's very, very interesting, considering the work that we're doing together. And so we joked that perhaps Kate and I were dungeon mates in a previous lifetime, right? So When Lightning Strikes, their intention is to spread awareness about spiritual emergence, Kundalini awakening. They're working on a film. Kate West, Katrina Michelle founded this movement together. And, they're doing a lot of great work, like what I've got going on here, to spread awareness about the validity of this awakening process. And they're working on a film. They've got some really big names that are, coming forth and sharing in this film. They've got a community as well, where people come together to share and to know that they're not alone. So they meet in a more of a private, intimate setting. Right now, of course, we're live on YouTube where the public can watch, but in When Lightning Strikes, a little bit more intimate, a little bit more personal. And I volunteer my time with them, and I hold a circle once a week there as well. So you can check them out. But so Kate and Katrina founded When Lightning Strikes around the same time that I began doing this work, as Brent Spirit, sharing what I can. And what I recognize, at least in myself, was that my work here is actually a manifestation of my shadow. It's actually a manifestation of my shadow, in that to some degree, in my reflection, my contemplation, it's almost like I'm doing all this work for a very selfish reason. It's like I'm putting together a body of evidence for why Kundalini awakening spirituality is valid, so that in the event that those guards come for me again, I can say, hey, wait, hold on, look, go to my YouTube channel, look at my podcast. I've interviewed all these people. They're all going through this, right? It's almost like I'm kind of doing that. It's like I'm trying to protect myself here from this fear of being, ridiculed and tortured and abused once again. So that's my selfish reason for doing this. It's like I'm putting together this body of evidence. That's what I look deep into it. I'm like, why am I so concerned about raising awareness about this? It's because this witch wound I have. So in a sense, it is serving me. And then of course, it's not solely selfish, because I know so many of us are carrying this wound around as well. So many of us are going through this as well. And so of course, I'm doing it for everybody here, the whole community, right? And I think, the same is what's going on with When Lightning Strikes, with Kate, Gordon, Katrina, and everyone else involved in the film. I think they're also operating from a similar place, trying to, soothe this wound, this collective wound that we have. And so a couple of days ago, I had a chance to connect with Katrina Michelle, who's a psychotherapist. Also, like I said, one of the co-founders, along with Kate, for When Lightning Strikes. And I had the inclination to read her dissertation, her PhD dissertation, I believe in transpersonal psychology. And so, as far as I understand, when you do a PhD for a dissertation, the intention is to conduct research in an area that hasn't been explored yet, right? That's to earn your PhD, you have to make a contribution to the academic world. And so Katrina's contribution was exploring this term that she calls spiritual resistance. And what she recognized was that many people have these awakenings. Some of us from childhood, we have these gifts, spiritual inclinations. And this spiritual resistance arises that hold us back from really going through and following through with the process easily and smoothly. So spiritual resistance can come from the external. And this is all information that I've gathered from her paper. From the external, so maybe the culture, the community, your family, your friends, your partner, they'll shut you down. They'll tell you, we don't mess with spiritual gifts. That's demonic. That goes against our religion, or that's dangerous. We don't play with that. Maybe it's internal as well. Not knowing really what's happening to you, not knowing about the phenomena and what you're experiencing, that can cause a lot of people to feel very confused, scared, feel strange. The gifts, the abilities that one can have can bring so much new information that we don't know how to process. So oftentimes people will turn to maybe things like addiction. People will turn to overeating to try and, suppress these gifts, because they're afraid of really going and moving really deeply into it. And so in her paper, in her research, she found that a few things were really soothing for people's witch wound. Sorry, not witch wound. That's not the language she uses. For people's spiritual resistance. And one of the number one ways was community, right? Community. So coming together with other people and finding that others are also going through similar things. Along with community, another thing that came up was language around the experience. So somebody may come across a book or a blog post or a video that describes some similar experiences to them, and they say, oh, finally, I realized that there's words to describe what I'm going through. Kundalini awakening or spiritual awakening, or, oh, psychic abilities and gifts. I see that there's terms for this. So that's another way that people can be really soothed. Their spiritual resistance can be a little bit diminished, and they can follow through with the awakening process, with the spiritual emergence process. And so overall, that's the reason why I'm doing this work here. That's also the reason behind KundaliniAwareness.org, which is my new project. Essentially, KundaliniAwareness.org is it is my shadow, right? It's my shadow coming forth. Like I said, I'm just trying to build this body of evidence. In the event that those guards come, I can say, hey, look, go to KundaliniAwareness.org. There's a bunch of stories there of people that are experiencing what I'm experiencing. There's a directory of licensed mental health professionals that have Kundalini awakening experience that are willing to support others. I'm not crazy. Don't put me back in that hole. That's essentially what I'm trying to do here. And I think, of course, I'm trying to do that for all of us, So KundaliniAwareness.org, go ahead and check it out. You can visit the website and submit your story about your Kundalini awakening process. We're putting together a directory, a collection of stories where researchers can go through and see that there's common themes. You can see that there are people all over the world that are experiencing this. So there's some basic criteria that we ask when you submit your story. Very simple things, that it's proofread, that it's written in a reflective way, that you've taken some time with it to write it, just to help us with credibility, to help us to show that these, we aren't just random people on the internet, commenting briefly about, this happened to me, but it's actually something that somebody's taken some time to put together. So that could be your contribution to this movement. It can be your contribution to healing the collective witch wound that's in our culture, to overcome some spiritual resistance. As well, we're putting together a directory, like I said, of licensed mental health professionals with Kundalini awakening experience. So if you are, or somebody that is a psychotherapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a social worker, we're putting together a directory. So submit an application to the directory, and then people can find your work. They can find out what you've got going on, and they can get support for this really challenging, difficult journey. So another example here, I was even in a conversation today with a really amazing woman named Julie Hoyle. We interviewed one another for each other's YouTube channels, and she had some spiritual gifts since childhood. And she felt very alone, very confused, very challenged by these gifts. And at one point, she asked God, she prayed to God, she said, God, please take all of this away, take this away, right? It was just too much, too overwhelming. And of course, her journey unfolded, and now she's really blossomed into her gifts and is doing some really great work. But as a young child, this is a lot for a child to deal with, right? So let's talk about some ways that we can soothe and heal the witch wound. And I would love to get everyone's take on some of these topics as well. I'll give everybody a chance to share, either on video or audio, or in the chat on YouTube or Zoom. But I've got a list here of some ways that we can soothe and heal the witch wound. So firstly, we want to know that truth prevails in the end. The light prevails in the end, right? If you have an awakening, or you have some gifts, or you find the light, you got to remember that this is the light, okay? People can hurt you, harm you, label you, lock you up, torture you, kill you. The light doesn't die, okay? This is one ultimate thing that we must remember. The light doesn't die, okay? So we don't give up hope, right? The light is the light. As well, we want to know that we are at the leading edge, okay? We're at the leading edge here. So we're meant to be understood. Sorry, let me take that back. We're meant to be misunderstood, okay? We're at the leading edge. If you weren't at the leading edge, you would be understood, right? If you're in the mainstream, nobody would have anything to, resist about what you have to share or what you're going through, right? So we're at the leading edge of evolution, of growth, of the expansion of consciousness. So there has to be some resistance, okay? Expect it. Tesla was misunderstood, right? Galileo, misunderstood, right? Leading edge. These people are at the leading edge, okay? So in some respects, you can say that, you're in the same camp as these great, great people, right? Great spiritual masters, mystics, right? I was even reading today about Ramana Maharshi in this great book. It's called Mystics, Masters, Saints, and Sages, okay? And even Ramana, after he had a very significant awakening, he says, I stopped going out with friends to play games and preferred solitude. I would often sit alone and become absorbed in the self, the spirit, the force or current which constituted me. I would continue in this despite the jeers of my elder brother, who would sarcastically call me sage or yogi and advise me to retire into the jungle like the ancient rishis. So even Ramana Maharshi, his brother was giving him a hard time for having spiritual interests, right? He's making fun of him. He's calling him names. Now, of course, we could say that's his brother. Brothers do this to each other. It's not that big of a deal. And I understand, but I thought it was an interesting point in Ramana's story here, right? Another point, just a little off topic, but I think it's so important. Ramana writes here, or he says here, I would continue in, he says here, I would often sit alone and become absorbed in the self, the spirit, the force or current which constituted me. The force or current which constituted me. He's talking about Kundalini Shakti for those out there who haven't yet recognized Ramana as being one who went through Kundalini awakening. He's talking about the Shakti, the energy flow moving through him. So another way that we can address this wish wound, heal the wish wound, is to find the others, right? Find the others. We are here together. We have found some of the others. It's to keep finding the others and know you're not alone, okay? We have the benefit in this time to use the internet, okay? We have the internet where we can find the others. We can also express and share. Unlike me in that time, in the Middle Ages, I had to go in the town square and be a crazy person. Now I can be a crazy person on the internet and stay safe in my room. And in fact, I can hide behind an alias, right? Brent Spirit is a character that I play. My first name is Brent. My last name, of course, is not Spirit. Although at one point somebody said, hey, that's a really cool last name you got. It really suits what you're doing. And I'm like, it's not my real last name. But, you can take up an alias, right? And you can express yourself. You don't have to even show your face like I am. You can write, right? I spent the first few years of my journey writing anonymously on a blog, right? And so I felt safe, right? People in my personal life didn't really know about it. I started to share it over time. In the beginning, I felt really safe and free to express, knowing that nobody was going to come for me, right? Nobody was going to come for me. And that's one of the benefits we have with the internet, right? There's so many outlets we have to express as well as to connect with others, okay? So we must appreciate this opportunity that we have. As well, we can soothe and heal the witch wound. Now, I'll clarify this point, but it's by censoring ourselves. So on one hand, we want to say, be authentic, be yourself, be free, right? If you like spirituality and you had a Kundalini awakening, be authentic, talk about it to everybody. I think that's a little bit of an immature stance, right? We want to be authentic, but we also want to be mature. So when I say censor yourself, when you're talking about your Kundalini awakening, your spiritual awakening, I don't mean censor yourself out of fear. I mean, censor yourself out of maturity, right? So a mature person recognizes that it's probably unlikely that the masses, the population of, maybe your small town or your family, they're probably not going to understand the details of your spiritual awakening, your Kundalini awakening process, okay? Because they simply haven't gone through it, okay? If they have, that's great. You're very fortunate. But I think maturity comes with this idea that, I don't need to talk about this to everybody. And it's not a betrayal against, your true authentic self. I think it's a mature stance. It's giving yourself this respect to know that this is actually something very sacred, private, that you don't have to talk about with everybody, okay? So that's one way that we can do it. We can give up expecting others to understand. They're just not going to if they haven't really experienced it. And a really easy way for us to understand why they resist us, why they judge us, is just think back to before you were on a spiritual path. You probably would also be like, if somebody came up to you and said, I had a Kundalini awakening, this snake energy, and I had a vision, and now I'm like, doing all this weird kriyas and stuff, you would probably say there's probably something wrong with this person too. So let's remember that and have empathy for those who, don't always understand us. That's one way that we can make peace and heal this witch wound that we have. Okay. As well, I want to remember what Jesus said. So Jesus was on the cross. These people had, ridiculed him. They were torturing him, laughing at him. And Jesus, being so compassionate, understanding, forgiving, truly embodied his awakened, aware, open heart, even at the lowest point when he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? He understood that these people that had, essentially, they were executing him. Even at that point, he said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know, right? And so not that I'm Jesus, not that you're Jesus, not that we're in, that same degree of consciousness, you could say. But we can take a little bit out of that experience, out of his experience, and take that as a teaching and say, when others ridicule you, judge you, laugh at you, call you names, misunderstand you, tell you that you're crazy, try to get you to, hide, remember, they don't know, right? They don't know. That's it. They just don't know. They haven't had the experience yet. Okay. So we want to forgive them actually. If they knew, they would come to you and ask for your help and your support and your guidance and your wisdom, right? If they knew, if they were at a position on their path, they would seek out, you know, what you have to share, but they don't know what they're doing. And so we must forgive them. Okay. It's a very difficult place to come to, but this is the great example of Jesus on the path, right? This is one of his most powerful teachings, I think. Okay. As well, you can contribute to raising awareness in your own way, right? Raise awareness in your own way if you feel called. If you feel called, you don't have to, do a YouTube channel or write a book or something, but you can raise awareness in your own way, and you'll feel a calling in the right direction. But it does make a big difference. It makes a big difference for all of those out there. Think of the young kids out there right now that are really struggling, teenagers, right? They're out there, and if anything that we can do for them, I think would make a big difference, make a big difference, right? Because if we think back to the earlier points on our journey, it's probably very difficult for many of us. It was for me, right? This began for me at 15. I didn't know what was going on, right? And as well, know that you won't be burned at the stake. You won't be crucified. Those times are behind us now. Okay, they're behind us now. You can have courage. You can hold yourself. You can remind yourself that you're safe. You're safe, and you're not alone. Okay. So I want to get to the chats here, and we'll invite some people to share. But first, let me take a moment here to talk to you a little bit about my course here, which is called Grounded Spiritual Emergence and Integration. Now, I don't exactly want to turn this into a commercial, but this is very relevant here because I put together this course to address exactly this issue. So people go through spiritual emergence or spiritual emergency when it's really difficult, and then they have difficulty integrating that into their lives, right? Integrating into their lives in a way that they can actually function without being, you know, ridiculed, judged, without coming across as a crazy person. So in this course, I put together many ways for us for how we can get back in the world and function amongst people who don't know anything about what this is. Okay. As well, I've also spoken about in this course ways that we can integrate the energy itself, the energetic aspects in the nervous system, in the chakras. So sometimes when we go through spiritual emergence, we can have our head, get really big with a lot of prana. It can feel like we're a spiritual bobblehead. It can cause a lot of things like insomnia, cause us to feel sort of just really ungrounded, like we're floating, like we're flying, get a lot of heightened energy. We can get a little too crazy. And so we want to find a ways to ground the energy. So in this course, I really break it down. We talk about the witch wound. We talk about why the Western scientific model, the Western medical model doesn't acknowledge spiritual emergence. We talk about the cultural implications of that. I think I've got 45 different techniques for grounding. I spent 10 years learning how to integrate this energy, learning how to integrate this spiritual emergence into my life. And in fact, I can open up and tell you about my spiritual emergence and one of the most difficult experiences that I had on my path, which was, I think I must have been 19. I had this huge energetic opening in my head. It was an ego death experience. I can no longer find this idea of Brent, of me, of I, of the ego. It's like I just completely vanished and was completely eradicated. And the only context I had for this was that I had realized enlightenment. I could only say this. I could only say, well, this must be enlightenment. This must be what they're talking about in Buddhism, anatta, no self. And so I didn't know how to function in the world. I didn't know how to relate with other people. It was very, very strange and bizarre. And I couldn't really find anybody who had any answers for me. So my parents noticed that I was acting a little strange. And they were asking me, why are you acting so weird? And I didn't know what to say. Eventually, after a few days of just trying to figure out how to navigate in the world, I sat them down at our kitchen table and I said, Mom, Dad, this is going to sound pretty strange, but I'm pretty sure I've realized enlightenment and I don't exist. Brent doesn't exist anymore. He was always an illusion. He was always just, a figment of my imagination, and Brent actually doesn't exist anymore. And I remember my mom burst into tears and was hysterical, and understandably so, because she thought, her son has completely lost his mind. And seeing her being so distraught about it was very difficult for me. And I learned very quickly in that moment, I cannot talk about this to just anybody and everybody. I got to figure out how I'm going to live in this new way without doing this to more people, because this isn't going to be an easy ride. And so from the next 10 years plus 10 years plus, I worked on grounding and integration. And then, of course, moving on, I went to go through a Kundalini awakening, and then I put all this together. I connect with countless people, and I've put all that I could find together in this course. It's really there to help you. It's really there to help you. So you can look at the curriculum here. I invite you to check it out, brentspirit.com/grounded. It's all there. The curriculum really breaks it all down if you want to have a look. If it calls you, check it out. It's also a great way to support me in doing this work. If you'd like to enroll in that course, 8 hours, some of my best material. Okay, so now let's hear from you all about your experiences with the witch wound. You can type it in the chat. You can also join us on Zoom on audio or video if you'd like to share. You can raise your hand on Zoom. If you're listening on YouTube and you'd like to share, join us on Zoom. The link is in the description. I'm going to go over here to check out the chats while I give anybody a chance to share if they'd like to share. As well, we'll do some Q&A, and the Q&A can be about anything to do with the spiritual path, Kundalini awakening, etc. Okay. So Zoe says, I'm carrying this in my throat, this ancestral conditioning. Yeah. Violet says, this is a really lovely idea and project. I think, too, it would be very helpful for individuals who encounter a lot of gatekeeping around the subject of Kundalini. Yes, I think Violet's speaking about KundaliniAwareness.org. Yeah, the idea here is, yes, as well, is to break down any gatekeeping. This is a universal human experience. Universal human experience. I think at some point a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked me about gatekeeping and, what does it take to join this community? And I said, the only thing it takes to join this community is having an interest in Kundalini awakening. Not even having a Kundalini awakening or experiences itself, just having an interest, you're welcome here. And your experience is valid, and what you have to share is valid. Okay. This is my stance. I don't think one tradition, one person, one individual, one religion has all the answers about this. Nobody does. Nobody does. This is an awakening process that's mysterious. It's at the leading edge of our evolution. And so no gatekeeping here. No gatekeeping here. We're all figuring this out together. We're all figuring this out together. So Brian says, 99% of people won't understand. Yeah. Zoe's giving some feedback about the course. She says it's good stuff. Thanks, Zoe. I really appreciate that. So Dre's writing here in the Zoom chat, the biggest challenge has been feeling like I live a double life. Being okay with knowing not everyone will understand and finding community elsewhere. It just kind of sucks feeling like I can't be my whole self in my day-to-day with the people that have known me my whole life. Tell me about it, Dre. Yes, this is how I feel. This is how I feel. Brent's spirit is like my alter ego, you could say. In my personal life, people know that I'm into this stuff, but a lot of people think that I'm just like a yoga teacher. And I just kind of leave it at that. They're like, yeah, this guy likes yoga and meditation and whatever. He's kind of weird. And then they just kind of just ignore it from there. And I'm happy with them just thinking I'm just like a yoga teacher. I'm kind of weird, whatever. But yeah, I was thinking about it earlier. It's almost like if some of them found some of my work, they probably wouldn't even have the interest or the energy to really invest time to really listen, which is probably good that they just would see a little bit about it and be like, I don't know what this is, and then just kind of scroll away. But yeah, I kind of have this sort of feeling of living a double life as well. It's something that I'm still trying to figure out and navigate, but I do recognize that there is some benefit to being incognito. You can do work incognito as well. You can still radiate that energy. Hey there, Dre, go ahead. Please go ahead, Dre.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to just add, I have like a separate Instagram that is not tied to anybody I know. And I still get scared to even maybe share about this experience or things I've learned, or just use it to connect with other people through there. I get scared that someone will find me and then, judge me. And it sucks, but just the feeling that comes up. And then I do also find myself judging others too sometimes, and feeling like there is a lot of this, although like spirituality, I feel like it's growing in popularity, I guess it's a way to put it. And sometimes I don't even necessarily feel connected to how people talk about spirituality in the mainstream, I guess. And so it's like I feel both sides of the coin. I myself am hesitant and afraid to share, and then I also find myself judging others in their experience. And I try to be mindful. Of course, I'm being very transparent that there is a part of me that judges, and also I'm open to it. But it's just, yeah, there's just a lot that comes up.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So honestly, about the other side of it too, I think collectively we carry the witch wound, but we also carry the archetype of the persecutor as well. And yeah, I carry that for myself. I can look at people on the path. For example, I mean, earlier today I saw a short clip of a Kundalini yoga class. Kundalini yoga, as in Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini yoga, and they're doing this like dancing stuff to the music and breathing, and the guys like basically it's the same kind of vibe of an aerobics class, just with a spiritual theme. And I was like, man, these people don't know what the hell they're doing. And so even I was coming with my own judgments here, and you can probably hear it in my voice, even the way I'm describing them, like they're, these a bunch of nuts, right? So I can get there too. Yeah, I can go to the similar places. Um, yeah, thanks for bringing us to this place. This is interesting. I'm curious if anybody else has this archetype of like, maybe it's strong words, but this archetype of the persecutor as well. Um, Interesting. Yeah, you know what happened to me with Instagram is I made Brent's Spirit Instagram, and I made it on my phone, and I think I pressed the wrong button or whatever, but it sent a message to like all my contacts saying, "Hey, Brent has a new Instagram." And all these people started following me, and I was like, "Oh God!" Like, and then at another point, like some of my family members found it, and I remember being at like a family function, and somebody was like, "Yeah, so like, tell me about this new Brent Spirit Instagram," and I was like, "Oh God." I think I just minimized it and said, it's just yoga. I'm just a yoga teacher. Um, and I can admit I went on to block those family members. To be honest, I just don't want to deal with it. I just don't want to deal with it. Um, and maybe there's some shadow work for me to do around this as well. Yeah, yeah. But thanks, Dre, for sharing. I'm curious if anybody else has similar experiences with the urge to share, and then having some resistance around that. Just us.
Oh, hello. Yeah. Okay.
Hey.
So, I just kind of wanted to share a little bit because I'm like currently going through it. Like we were talking about, judging, like spiritual scene, and I used to. It's funny enough because it's kind of like I was like resisting what I am in a way. So like the term shaman, for example, like prior, I've always been spiritual, but when I would hear that word or people say that they're a shaman, I would always be very judgy, roll my eyes, scoff, like, really, you know? But like recently, like through this journey, I guess it was just, pure ignorance of what the shamanic journey and path was. And once I found some clarity on that, I realized, oh, okay, so I definitely resonate with this. There's some validity here to that. And I have consciously chosen to, embrace that. There's even still some hesitancy with the word shaman to me. So I'm like, I don't know. How do I release that resistance? Do I continue to use that word? Do I label myself as such? Like it's still a little uncomfortable for me, but also a little comforting that this is what it is, like I've always felt it was I don't know. I just always felt something. And I just felt comfort in that path, that journey, because it was very clearly what I have been experiencing currently and just throughout my entire life, you know. So anyway, it's just funny that bring up like, being the persecutor of the, you know, spiritual paths and things of that nature, because I definitely experienced that, but it felt like it was more so resistance to myself and my path of what I've been doing, more than anything. So, I mean, I'm still working through some of that resistance, but I've accepted a lot of it. And like I said, it's going to continue to be a journey for me. But being a healer and creator is definitely what I've been doing this entire time. That's what excites me. That's what I'm really good at. So, so anyway, it's I just interesting that was brought up, because I've definitely felt this witch wound for a while, being a practitioner of I guess magic in a sense. Um, it's yeah, it's been tough, but I'm starting to learn how to lead with my spirituality a bit more than I used to. And it starts with, again, that throat chakra, talking about it, accepting it, and just being okay with that being, who you are.
Yeah. Thanks, Naima. The labels are always a tricky thing because it takes a lot of courage to really step into those shoes. I know that some have used this term neo shaman. I'm sure there's some cultural implications around that neo shaman, but I've heard that term used. I've also heard that somebody sent me a clip on Instagram just the other day of an interview with a shaman, and she said, if you are chosen for this path, you have no choice. And those who resist that, their calling to be a shaman, in some instances, they die. Now, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but that just goes to show that, like, this is your calling. You just have to go through with it. And even the resistance may come up, but yeah, we have to just keep going with the direction that we're called, no matter how scary it can be. And it's quite scary. There's always an initiation into some of these more advanced roles of healer and creator, and wise man or woman, for example. There's some initiation, some difficulty, some friction that we've got to kind of go through. But yeah, it's exciting, and I could hear it in your voice, when you said, this is what you love to do, to heal and to create. And so excitement seems to be a great compass as we navigate the journey here. So I'm going to go over to Zoe here, and then I'll catch up on the chats on YouTube and Zoom. And if you're on YouTube, join us on Zoom. The link is in the description.
Hello.
Hey, Zoe.
Hey, you can hear me?
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, great. So, there was a few things that were said, and I wanted to comment, and I'm like, let me trace my thoughts back right now. So, okay, so the way that I discovered the witch wound was, I was reading something on Instagram that somebody had posted, and my heart resonated with it right away, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And based on the way that, like, I work on myself is I'll ask like specific questions and I'll get the resonance like in my body and stuff. So, the witch wound came about in terms of it being in my throat, and it has to do with like ancestrally. And then I realized part of it is also what you were talking about, the inner child stuff. Um, because I think I grew up with the wound of like having my voice not matter.
Mm.
And when I was a kid, and I think that kind of stuck with me. So there was a lot of times, and I mean, I've had this through my conditioning as well. There's a lot of times where, like, because you're a girl, you're not supposed to say anything. You're supposed to just be quiet. You know what I mean? And let other people say what they need to say. But because you're a woman or you're a girl, you're not supposed to say anything. So I remember that used to frustrate me once I became a teen and older. And I mean, my mother still has the same conditioning, right? So, but now I'm actually able to understand, like, and trace things back and see how it is that I'm carrying this stuff now. And I'm accepting the responsibility that this is mine to clear in this lifetime. And it will be done. It will be done. I will not leave it. I will not leave it. So, yeah. And I've also discovered too, I mean, I don't know if you've heard about implants and stuff like technologies.
A little bit.
So, that there was some implants that, I have that I need to work on clearing with some of my, what do you call them? Beings that I'm connected to, the surgeons of the universe, the Arcturians. So apparently they are very helpful in clearing implants and stuff like that. And I've also noticed that if we have any throat issue, they're very well connected to our womb area as well, the sacral chakra. So I know for me, this is something that needs more work on for sure. And what else was I going to tell you? I think it's amazing that you started the organization. I feel like we just need to like spread the word. And yeah, because like you said, it's the power of community is huge.
Yeah.
And the more that we can speak up about our experiences and just be like honest and genuine about it, I feel like it's going to change the perception that is out there currently, right?
Right.
And also like I want to be able to go to the doctor and say this is what's going on with me, and have them go, oh, okay, you're having ascension symptoms, or you're going through Kundalini awakening. I want that to become known one day. So like I'm willing to do what it takes on my part to make this happen one day, because even if not for my generation, but the next generation, right? I just feel like it's so worth it.
Well, Zoe, thank you. Thank you for sharing so far. I really admire your warrior spirit. You know, your attitude when you said it will be done, addressing this will be done. That really hit me. That's profound. And I want to just address a little bit about this witch wound in particular. You know, you mentioned being stifled for being a woman, for being a girl. The witch wound itself, the term itself, if I'm not mistaken, Kimberly Jones, I believe, coined that term specifically for the feminine in general, though I may have extracted it and appropriated it for the general population. But I'm going to try and get Kimberly onto a conversation with me where we can unpack it, because yes, it is a wound of the patriarchy, right? Women in particular have been especially stifled and told, that they don't have power or a say or and whatnot. So I think the witch wound itself, of course, witches being a term for the feminine, is something to unpack a little bit further, to give credence to the divine feminine as well. So I'll see if I can unpack that with Kimberly on an episode. I know that Kate West and Katrina and Michelle are good friends with her, so I'm hoping that I can get her on the show. Okay. So I'll go over to Colin. Hey, Colin.
Hey, Brett, how's it going?
It's going good. It's good to be with you again.
I was wondering, just curious in your personal experience with the witch wound and how writing, what that did for you. You said early on you blogged a lot and just wrote and wrote and wrote, and like how did that? Do you find that helped?
Yeah. So
the
writing was interesting. It was back in the days of Tumblr, before Tumblr took went downhill. But I had an anonymous blog. My icon was just a black square, and I just wrote, and I felt like I could write anything and everything that I wanted. And I quite honestly was not writing for an audience. I didn't know anything about that sort of stuff. I was just writing, and an audience began to form around that. And what I found was that there were so many other people that were resonating with what I was sharing. And I thought, okay, I'm not the only one. As well, the writing in particular helped to actually clear this throat chakra sort of thing that many of us have, where consistently just showing up and allowing that energy to flow, I became trusting and confident that if I became still and had a chat box up where I could start typing a document, the words would just start flowing. And so that was very useful for me to learn how to write, sort of how to channel, how to enter into the flow. As well, the material that was coming forth was coming from a place beyond my mind. So I was actually benefiting from the teachings that were coming through, from the writings that were coming through. I used to say that I am more of a reader of my own blog than I am a writer. I'll write it once, but I would read it 10 times and I would revisit it and say, oh, there's like another layer of meaning in there that I didn't even know. So it was like I was writing for myself. And over time, the body of work itself served to build confidence in what it was I was experiencing, because I was finding that the messages that were coming through were consistent. They made sense. They were logical. And I had the support of other people that were also saying, hey, yeah, this makes sense. So I started to say, okay, maybe I'm not crazy. And this isn't just like some sort of crazy rambling that I'm doing. It's actually something meaningful. So that's how the writing helped me to overcome these types of sort of witch wound type blockages and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because well, the reason I'm asking is because I recently, I've always been, for the past, since about 5 years ago, I wanted to write a book, not necessarily about awakening or Kundalini. That's obviously going to work itself in, but some darker stuff. And I started writing late last month, and it's gotten crazy. It's like I'm a good 80 pages in. I can sit down every day for a good 4 to 5 hours and just go. It's like magic, but I realize how empowering it is.
Yeah.
And how it's like you're owning your truth. There's something about putting it down that you can think it, you can talk about it, you can talk about it in a group like this, but there's some magic to putting it down, and it's amazing what comes out, but it's really empowering. Like no one can take that away from you once it's down in words.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting that you're saying that. What came to me was like when you put it like as you're speaking, it's like a contract. It's not a verbal agreement. It's a contract when you're writing it down. It's real, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking here. Abracadabra.
The spell thing.
Yeah, I think it's something to do with language. I will create as has been spoken. So it's with the word I will create, right? Abracadabra. And I'm just recalling, that term, like we're having a conversation about witches and whatnots and magic and that kind of stuff. And, it's with the written word that we, can make a lot of, real impact in our lives. So yeah, 80 pages in, that's great. I mean, just keep going. I'd be really curious to see how that unfolds for you. Yeah, very, very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah. And I wanted to share something with the group too. One thing
Please.
About recently, I wanted to get some help, just get someone to talk to, some like therapist style help. And there's when you're searching for a therapist, there's something you can just a little search tip, like Psychology Today, for instance. A lot of times they write down their religions in there. Like they'll write, oh, Christian, Buddhist, whatever. But a lot of people will write spirituality in there.
Mm.
And I challenge people to kind of poke at some of those people, because I've found a couple of great therapists via Psychology Today just by that one word. Like I found a woman recently and I just started talking to her and I just went right into it, Kundalini and all, and she didn't flinch. She knew the whole story. She just was totally accepting, and it became more of a conversation about, my spiritual path than it did maybe say personal problems I was having or something. You know, it was the combination. But the people are out there, you know, and they're hiding in plain sight. So, you know, like I say to everyone, if anyone's looking for some help, and top it all off, the cherry on the cake, she takes insurance. She takes my insurance. So
Perfect.
it's totally free. And she's not the first one I've found like that. And I just want to tell the group, it's like, yeah, you'd be surprised, you know, and there's always those, you know, meet and greets, those, what do they call them in therapy, like the assessments or whatever. It's a good way to, you know, see if the person's right, you know. And I'm going to see this woman again just out of curiosity, because it's like, hey, we can't have enough support on this path. And if someone's willing to listen and they understand, you know, they understand your language, I'm like, hell, you know, it's like, I'm going to give it a shot, you know.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's a fantastic practical tip. Fantastic. And for those that don't know, Psychology Today is a directory of psychotherapists, counselors, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. Yeah, what a great tip. What a great tip.
They're hiding in plain sight. Yeah. And this is in a town where, you know, I live in Tucson, and it's not, you don't have a huge selection in Tucson, you know, but they're there, you know.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Hey, Sid, welcome. Thanks for hopping on. I saw you on the YouTube here. Now you're here with us on Zoom. It's good to be with you, Sid.
How's it going, Brent?
Oh,
I like the night owl theme. I think that's also what's interesting with the Kundalini process is, or at least I can only say from my experience, but I've read it where it starts rewiring your circadian rhythm. So, you know, you're naturally a night owl for some time there, you know. I mean, I remember staying up till 5 a.m. having difficulties for a long time, 6-8 months of just integration. So yeah, this is a useful time slot.
Great.
So yeah, just throwing that out there. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it came to me sort of well, I'll be honest, came to me spontaneously to do a late night show, kind of like a coast to coast type of vibe sort of thing. I am a night owl. I don't even want to tell you guys what time I wake up. It's embarrassing. I sleep in a lot, but I stay up very late, and I'm always at my computer. And this is just my time. I'm wide awake right now, and I was thinking about what to call it. You know, what do I call the show? And my favorite TV show is the Trailer Park Boys, and they have a podcast called Trailer Park Boys Park After Dark, and that's their podcast. They just kind of hop on, kind of just, you know, just chat, ramble, just crack jokes, read the news and stuff. It's really just very low consciousness type material, but I love it. And so I was like, you know what, I can go with Kundalini After Dark, and we can kind of just keep it relaxed and get some conversation going. And you know, I'm happy that so many people can make it. Violet writes here, I've been on both sides of that coin, certainly. I was highly skeptical of Kundalini accounts in the past, chalked them up to delusion and exaggeration. Now I experience a lot of apprehension when sharing my own story because I fully understand that judgment. Yes, great. Great growth there. Great growth and understanding. Medina says, I feel that judging the spiritual scene and spiritual experiences can be very healthy too. There are a lot of misinformation and abuse out there. Yes, I agree. Discernment is key. Discernment is key. And at times, perhaps that discernment can look like persecution. It is persecution, but yes, I agree. Yes, there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of abuse. Discernment is key. We can't blindly accept everything in the name of you know, non-judgment, right? We still have to have some discernment to protect ourselves. Tracy says, I feel like I have absolutely no one to talk to besides my sister, who was into spirituality before I had my Kundalini awakening. My sister had some kind of spiritual experience and then somehow found a way to shut it down. She dropped spirituality altogether. She advised me to drop it as well when I told her about my Kundalini, as if it would go away. So now I truly have no one to talk to about my 4-year experience. I absolutely don't want to be perceived as being crazy. Well, Tracy, I know you're not crazy. I know that, you know, we've been in touch throughout this community, and I know you're absolutely not crazy. And it's really unfortunate to feel that type of, you know, you could say betrayal, abandonment, pressure from somebody close to you. I've experienced the same thing myself. It's really challenging when somebody that you know genuinely has spiritual experiences and they go on to then deny and dismiss and experience a lot of that inner spiritual resistance to their own process. Now, in Katrina Michelle's dissertation, she describes that is the spiritual resistance. Sometimes it arises because in some way or another, they know, or maybe we know, that if we go down this rabbit hole, if we really pursue this spiritual awakening process, we're going to see some really difficult things about ourselves. We're going to have to process a lot of pain, a lot of emotions. We're going to have to challenge a lot of our old beliefs. We're going to have to reinvent our identity. We're going to have to rethink our association with religion. It's a lot. And I think on some level, people get a glimpse, they see what it's all about, and then they go, I know, not right now. And they shut it out. And unfortunately, they try and get other people to shut it out too. Maybe we could say that's a bit of a projection on their part. Interesting stuff. But yeah, it's a very challenging thing. I've seen this happen with a handful of people that had quite literally very profound, significant awakening experiences. And now they have run in the completely opposite direction. And quite frankly, it can bring about a lot of suffering in their life because it kind of eats at them deep inside. I think it's eating at them because they know they have to eventually, get on this path and really give it some attention. Violet says, I truly believe the universe has a sense of humor, and so do we spiritually. I'm an astrologer and have always been spiritual and still really resistant to a number of metaphysical spiritual concepts. I have to imagine this was part of the chore we chose to tackle in this lifetime, judgment, our own and others, so we can more fully experience love and acceptance for ourselves and one another. Well said. Well said. Yeah. So pro Tivleni, definitely not saying your name right, but they say, I had a Kundalini awakening in an ayahuasca ceremony. It has destroyed my life. So sorry to hear that. I just today uploaded a conversation with Aaron McLean, and he had a Kundalini awakening in conjunction with ayahuasca as well. You can check out that conversation. Maybe you can even reach out to him. I think he may be able to have some insight for you.
Hey, Brent.
Hey, Sid.
Thanks for the opportunity. You've probably got this question a lot, and I haven't dived in much into your work in a sense to search for this particular topic. And you've probably been asked this a lot, but what are your thoughts on microdosing for releasing blockages? Do you think it's dangerous? Do you think it's playing with fire? Do you think it's useful?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was actually speaking about it last week as well, and I'm happy to talk about it a little bit. Ultimately, you are your own master. It is your system. It's your body, right? So I just say approach everything with consciousness. And so what that means is that if you're going to ingest anything, media, even TV shows, movies, whatever it is, we approach it with consciousness, mindfulness, etc., as best as we can. Now, what I described in the last week, I said a microdose is a little bit of a tricky thing because our system becomes very sensitive during this process. So a microdose for an average person, maybe a megadose for an individual. So as a teacher speaking to, I don't know how many people are here, stay away from it. But I do recognize that everybody has their own inner guidance, and they're going to go on their own journey. And so I can give some insight there. Of course, can be very useful tools, very, very useful, as long as we approach them with a proper intention in a ritualistic manner. So to me, this means, and I have a talk about Kundalini and cannabis, where I describe this method, which is we approach it as a sacred ritual, which means set and setting, mindset in the right place. Setting is orderly. We tidy up. We make sure that, our space is like clean, like a church, like a temple, like a mosque, like a synagogue. It's clean, it's tidy, it's nice, it's neat. The people that are there aren't on a bunch of different other drugs or drinking, or, they're not people that we hate or whatever, right? We're in a safe setting, mindset. So we're going into it with proper intention, even a microdose, right? Even a microdose. So some may say, well, microdose, I don't need to do all that stuff. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a microdose. Well, I would say if it's not that big of a deal, why are you taking it in the first place anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even for a microdose, it should be done with an intention. And what do you want to get out of this? Humble yourself before the substance. As well, from what I've kind of experienced and gathered, the natural stuff seems to be what meshes best with this process as opposed to the more synthetic stuff, the chemical stuff, compared to the more organic material. So that's something to keep in mind. You can feel into the energy of the substances themselves. As
For me,
well, go ahead.
for me, the experience has been that I'll somewhat receive a signal like, hey, it's time to revisit, and then it finds its way to me. And then it'll happen multiple times where it's like, okay, all right, this is probably trying to, it's trying to communicate to me that, I mean, it has its own, mystery to it, but it's like it's trying to communicate to me that it's time. And I have had certain blockages, and I think it's been somewhat useful. And you have to kind of taken a big leap of faith recently with sudden changes, and just trying to ride the wave, and it's scary. And I think that it's helping me cope with the fear around it. But ultimately, I'm just not sure if I'm doing something dangerous. And then also there are concerns about the subconscious material, and the psychedelics, I guess just pushing it outwards and pouring it out, and to where it's kind of extreme. It's like, I could have probably done this slower.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like I just forced the dam open, and that's a scary, scary place to be. So, but for the short period, I'm finding it somewhat beneficial. So I was always just curious.
Yeah. If it's beneficial, great. Like I said, you're your own master, and you're aware of, what could possibly happen. I don't know if I guess we could say dangerous, but I think like it's just intense. It's intense, right? A lot of stuff can come up, and we have to be ready for that, ready to work with that, and treat them with great respect. The flow will take us to the things that we need to explore, and sometimes it is psychedelics, it is plant medicine, and we have to trust the flow. Ultimately, these substances have been used for millennia. I mean, they're, in my opinion, there's the origins of this path come through substances. I really think so.
Yeah.
And so it's like that, but I have to play it safe uh with the audience. And so that's why, I err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
I agree.
up to you. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I guess I'll just close on that by saying I saw the Craig Holiday video where he kind of just said it was beneficial. So I thought maybe, ask you as well, So thank you for your feedback.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I can be open. It's been beneficial for me. My awakening was on psychedelics. My awakening was on psilocybin, a major, rising experience. And what I say is, keep in mind now, everybody, many people do psychedelics. Very few people have a Kundalini awakening. So let's not assume that it was just the psychedelics as well. I was doing a lot of sadhana before, during the experience itself, and after. So the whole thing with sadhana, it's just a supplement, not the whole thing. And eventually we have to let that go too. We have to let that go. That's what's really, I think, the biggest key.
That's the point that I'm reaching.
Yeah.
And I turned 30 in like 2 months. It's like kind of the beginning of a new era, and so it's like, and also I think at 30, there's just some tectonic plate shifts that happen in your life, and it's just a accelerated transformation. But I was kind of in a dull place you could call it the void for maybe 4 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's just happening so fast. It's kind of scary. But hey, it's a roller coaster, like you said, right? So that's exactly what it is.
For sure. I'm actually doing a training with Katrina Michelle and Elizabeth Sabat on psychedelics, ethically being able to support people through maybe a session, for example. The reason I'm exploring that is just because, of course, I'm interested in it, but I know that a lot more people are going to be having experiences as a result of psychedelics as the culture shifts. And so I want to be somewhat more prepared. And maybe perhaps it's good that you have some experience under your belt, because maybe in 10 years, you're playing the role of guide, teacher, healer, etc. and you have some experience to draw upon, because I quite literally, I don't know how anybody can support somebody through psychedelic challenges without having an experience. I really don't understand how that's even possible. And so, yeah, maybe that's part of it too. You've got some experience under your belt that you can draw upon after, you know, say move into your 30s and are no longer really indulging as much. For me as well, my 20s was just like a lot of far out exploration. And I told myself, I'm about to turn 31 in a couple of weeks. I told myself, you know, now I have to implement all the crazy things I've seen. Now it's time to put it to work, to hang up the phone after getting the message. I think Alan Watts said that. So yeah, thanks, Sid. This is a good conversation here. There's some good chat going on here in the Zoom as well. Naima says the natural substances have their time and place. Approaching it with consciousness is key. I've been called towards them a few times on this journey, and I understood why. Yeah, exactly. Approaching them with consciousness is key. And Violet says here, I know Brent is going to answer, but per Sid's question, I can say that I totally could not handle microdosing at all following my spontaneous awakening. I've become so sensitive physically and energetically. Even tiny amounts of plant medicine would trigger a huge energetic reaction. I struggle with kriyas and overwhelming bliss states as it is, while the desire to MD persists. I know I literally could not handle it. Very interesting. Yes, you know what's actually interesting to me, and I'm curious if anybody else has had this experience. Just holding the physical substance, I would get intoxicated in very strange ways as this process began to get more amplified. Just holding it, I would start to trip. I think I've read a little bit online where a few people mentioned something like this, but it doesn't seem that common. But I'm curious if anybody else here has had an experience like this. Brian says the psychedelics. Go ahead, Naima.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I've had something, I don't know, not exactly like that. But like if I don't know, like I still hang around people, you know, and so like I'm not smoking marijuana, but there'd be people around me who were, and they were high. I would just feel high, like I wasn't, you know, ingesting it, but like, or if I'm like focused on someone and I'm just picking up on them, like I would start feeling, you know, high on marijuana. So not exactly, but like just touching them. But I can see how that would be a thing for sure.
Yeah, the contact high amongst other people. I mean, we get contact highs as empaths, right? All sorts of emotions and stuff. And yeah, the contact high being around people that are in altered states of consciousness, for sure, very valid thing. Brian here says the psychedelics blew my ego to bits. My Kundalini awakening happened during a trip. 0 out of 10, don't recommend. Laughing my ass off. Yeah. Naeem is adding here, I listen to my body with substances and I'm consciously aware of my interactions with them and ask why. Great. Tom says, regarding LSD, see Be Here Now by Baba Ram Das. Richard Alpert, PhD. Learn what happened to his guru when he took a dose large enough for 10 people of pure clinical LSD. A wonderful read. Violet saying here, didn't nothing happen, if I remember, because he was already in a permanent state of shifted consciousness? Yes, nothing happened to him. He just kind of smiled, I think. He just kind of laughed. Nothing happened. But Ram Dass's guru was, he was an avatar, right? He was something else. Very, very advanced and evolved. And I see Tom's raising his hand here. Maybe he's got something to add.
As I recall, what happened was he took that enormous dose, and Alpert had, or Ramdas, Alpert, had doubts that the first time he gave him a 3-person dose, and he had doubts that he actually took it because nothing happens. This time he made a big show of sticking in his mouth and showing that it's in his mouth a 10-person dose and swallowing it, etc. And then stood there, and something happened, but he said it had no effect on him because he didn't have an ego to feel fear with. And what he said was, this is God medicine. Says, you Americans like taking pills, so God appeared to you in the form of pills. So that's why you take LSD. Problem is, you can only stay for a few hours. If you want to learn to stay with God, whatever, all the time, learn to meditate. And that was about the that was about it. That sort of Ram Dass began to stop using using drugs at about that time, because he tried meditation instead and found that it was a better way for him.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tom. Really fascinating stories about Ram Dass and his guru Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji. Even Ram Dass, he describes that I think at some point on his journey, he was able to recognize that at the back of his brain there was all sorts of sort of energetic matter that had built up as a result of the excessive LSD use that he had to like process in meditation. So there's a downside to all of this. There's really a downside. There's, we can show us something, but there's no free lunch, right? There's no magic pill ultimately that just has no downside, unless of course, you're Neem Karoli Baba, then you can take as much as you want.
Hey, Brent. Yeah, last question. It's just it's kind of silly, but I was thinking like you never get tired of the Kundalini topic, do you? I mean, this is, I guess, obviously this is your calling, right? So
Yeah, I really don't I don't get tired. I think this is just, there's nothing else I could conceive of that would be more interesting than this. And even when I, say even when I'm responding to say a question or a topic, there's always something fresh that comes through. I can always speak about it in a different angle, or something new just comes out of me. And so it's just like it never gets old. And I quite literally can't think of anything else. I can't think of anything else. In fact, I was looking at this diagram of what the Japanese call the concept of the Ikigai, a reason for living. And this topic addresses all of the different points.
well, it's second nature to you. So it's like not even almost like it's not even, doesn't even feel like a job to you, right? It's just like comes naturally,
Yeah,
flows.
it's really incredible. Yeah, so the Ikigai is what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
badass.
yeah, it's a really incredible tool if you're looking to discover what your calling, mission, purpose, passion in life is, that fits all of those. And I've done a bunch of other things that didn't meet all of those, right? And this meets all of those. And I think I'm just really grateful that I finally found something that I can really go all in on. And it's this topic. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go over here to Violet's question here. Violet says, I have a question about judgments and the witch wound. Does anyone find that Kundalini is treated like something dirty? There are so many misconceptions about Kundalini being this primarily sexual energetic phenomenon, and even broaching it with others makes people pretty uncomfortable, which naturally makes me uncomfortable and feel bad, wrong, weird. Yes, yes, yes. It is. It's the Kundalini has to do with every dimension of life, right? Every dimension of life, including sex. But of course, the sexual component became the big deal, and now it became associated with like tantric sex, and all this sort of thing like that. And people hear about this and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, this is too intense. It's taboo. It's one of those topics that we don't talk about, which is of course sex. And so they make others feel like they shouldn't really broach those topics. But yeah, I've experienced this too. Even just tantra itself is like, it's not about sex, but you mention tantra to somebody and they automatically associate it with sex. It's just how it goes, right? This is our culture, right? Sex is so fascinating to us, and yet it's also something that we would maybe consider taboo, or like you're saying here, it's like something dirty. So it's really unfortunate, and yeah, it's good that we can talk about this in a more broader sense and talk about the other dimensions of this path: healing, love, connection, like we were just talking about with Sid, purpose, right? There's so many other dimensions to this journey, not just the sexual component. It's a valid, very, very powerful, valid thing that we should talk about from time to time, but not the only thing. But yeah, hopefully we can clean it up a little bit so it doesn't feel so dirty for some people. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for a great Kundalini After Dark meeting here. Really appreciate you all for sharing so openly, so honestly today. It's really been helpful for myself. as well. And hopefully for others out there listening. So we'll do it again next week, same time, same place. Next week, I want to talk a little bit about the story behind this ring here, my Kundalini snake ring. Interesting story there. And I want to talk about one of the worst, most shameful things I've ever done in my life. I want to let you guys know about that. Pretty incredible story, I think. But yeah, pretty bad. I did a pretty bad thing. So we'll unpack that together, and we'll see if anybody else has some interesting stories that they want to share and whatnot for next week. So you can look out for that. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, the Kundalini Q&A meeting will be taking place with me on Zoom. So that won't be broadcasted on YouTube, just on Zoom. It's free. You can join. And if you have questions, we'll take questions. We'll see what comes out. And I want to invite you once again to check out kundaliniawareness.org. Submit your stories, please. If you're a licensed mental health professional, submit an application to the directory. Call in, please. You mentioned those therapists that you connected with. If they have Kundalini experience, I please ask you to share the link with them, get them to submit an application. That would mean a lot to me and the community. If you'd like to meet with me one-on-one for some support in private, I'm available for that. You can find out at brentspirit.com. For all those that donate to keep this going, thank you so much. It's really, really goes a long way. I'm here to help you. So if you help me, I'm able to help more people. And that's how we're going to do it. And I really, I'm so grateful to all those that show up here. Even if you have nothing to offer, I appreciate all of your engagement. It means so much more than even a donation, if I can be quite honest, because it's just pushing the mission forward to get this awareness raised about Kundalini. So that's what we're doing together. So thank you so much. But for those who have a little bit of change lying around and can make a donation, I really appreciate you. I really, really do. Check out the course, Grounded Spiritual Emergence and Integration, if you'd like to support me and get some of my best work there. It is there. And I'll catch you next time. All the links are in the description for everything I have to offer. Thank you all so much today for connecting, sharing, supporting one another, discussing the witch wound, really, really deep topic.